Last week we talked about two phrases relative to God and his creation. There's Creatio ex Materia, which means out of material, or there's Creatio ex Nihilo, which means creation out of nothing at all. And we talked all about the Christian view and how that has grown from the Old Testament times, where it was pretty much Creatio ex Materia, and then with Greek influence, it became Creatio ex Nihilo, all right, or out of nothing. Well, we left off saying that initially Mormon doctrine went hand in hand with the Christian belief that God created everything by and through Christ, Creatio ex Nihilo, meaning he did it all out of nothing. Early in the Book of Mormon, in Jacob 4:9, it says God brought everything into existence by speaking. That's the traditional Christian view. Even in the Joseph Smith translation of the book of Genesis, and has Moses not saying anything about a pre-existent matter, or and the LDS-owned newspaper called the Evening and Morning Star ran articles all the way up until 1832 that validated the idea that God created everything out of nothing. So Mormonism, as it does in many places, echoed standard Christianity all the way up through the early 1830s. And even though it really began only in 1830 officially. But as we said last week, thinkers in the Enlightenment era in the 1700s saw matter and material as always having existed. And Joseph Smith hooked into this thinking, and he adopted it and he incorporated it into his teaching. And remember, however, he was not the first Christian thinker to do this. A Universalist publication in 1826 said, "We are not bound to believe that all things were created out of nothing, lest we should presuppose that all will return to nothing again in the final end. As we may safely believe that anything which has a beginning of existence can never have eternity connected with it." Now, this was a Universalist saying. This predated Smith's Book of Mormon publication or anything like that, or his advanced thought. Translated, that saying means if something has a beginning, it will certainly have an end. But if it has always existed, it will always exist. And so the Age of Enlightenment thinkers of reason said, look we don't believe God created everything out of nothing. Creatio ex Nihilo is an untruth. It's a mystical lie of these zealous believers. We believe that matter has always been around, and that if there is even a God, he created things out of that pre-existent matter. I believe ideas like this led Smith to teach many years later that everything that can be considered real or material has therefore always existed. And anything that has a beginning, he taught, if you can give me anything that has a beginning, it's not real, it's untrue, and it will end. That's how Joseph Smith started to think on this stuff. So the first time anything appears in LDS writings about this is in Doctrine and Covenants 93, 22 through 33, and it speaks of element, that means matter, and spirit being eternal. Matter and spirit being eternal. This is the first time. And then in 1839, Parley P. Pratt, a great LDS thinker, affirmed, as did theologian Joseph Priestley in 1777, some 60 years earlier, that matter and spirit are two great principles of all existence. That means matter and spirit have always been. In other words, every animate or inanimate object is composed of either matter, spirit, or both. It was in 1842 that Joseph Smith introduced the doctrine that all spirits are simply refined matter. Derek's been hitting the sauce tonight and a few other things. I try with the guy. When this came out, it winds up meaning in the long run that, listen to this closely, since spirit has the same properties as physical matter, remember, and physical matter cannot be created nor destroyed, then human beings composed of a body, material, a soul, material, a spirit, material, anything that is real is matter, exist, you ready? Independently of God. This is when Joseph Smith went from early Mormonism, Book of Mormon, typical traditional Christian, just branch of Christianity, to stepping into a realm of the Age of Enlightenment. And when he said that all matter, anything, everything that can be considered real is material, he stepped away from their God needing to be involved in the creation of man. And it's from this very position that Mormondom changed views on God, his nature, Christ, our elder brother, us becoming gods. That all started to come off and springboard from this idea of the Age of Enlightenment that matter has always existed. Once this principle was fully embraced by Joseph Smith, create and created, which are found in his translation of Genesis and the book of Moses, became or turned to organized in his book of Abraham. So he started off and he said created, not knowing the Hebrew barach and all those different meanings of it. He simply wrote about created in his book of Genesis, in his translation of the book of Moses. But when he got to the book of Abraham, all of a sudden God didn't create, he organized. And that's how he progressed or digressed in his thinking on matter. And it was here at this point that Smith made clear his agreement with the thinkers of the Age of Enlightenment of his day. And this is what they said: the elements are eternal. That which has a beginning will surely have an end. That's their argument. So if man has a beginning out of nothing, and God created man out of nothing, that man will certainly have an end. But if man has always existed, that man cannot cease to exist. And that was the logic. It was also here that Mormonism tore away further from the view that's not found in Hellenistic Judaism. Hellenistic Judaism fully endorses Creatio ex Nihilo. And the Apostolic Church fully endorsed Creatio ex Nihilo. The early church fathers, all, Middle Ages, all, even in the Reformation, all supported Creatio ex Nihilo out to this day and age. And ignoring all that was once taught by Smith, he changed and he engaged in so-called science and turned from the Bible. And I'm just going to give you two passages which I've already given you. Colossians 1:16, 17 says, "For by him were all things," that's past in the Greek, everything created, "that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist." That's talking about the Word of God. And then, of course, Romans 4:17, it says, "Even God who quickened the dead and called into existence those things which be not as though they were." He called into existence those things that are not as if they were. And that is a form of passages that support Creatio ex Nihilo. So to me, this is a departing signature step in the mind of Joseph Smith from organizing that Christian movement to kind of restore the church with the Book of Mormon and its contents, which are primarily pretty Christian. Like 98% of it's pretty Christian in terms of an Old Testament narrative. And he began to build a non-Christian empire, in my estimation. Remember, the empire, not necessarily the people, that's built on money and matter and men becoming gods. And that was the split. As stated last week, either God created all things from nothing, or matter has always existed somehow, and God and all the other gods before or after him are relegated to just organizing matter that has always existed somehow. You know, to me, it's really simple, and maybe it's simple to you that I'm a simpleton, that God started everything. But to other more scientifically minded, they say there's no way. Matter has always been around. God only, if there is a God, if they agree to a God, he just simply organizes it. Stepping away for a second from apologetics and all of our different opinions and things, I think the stance a person takes on how they see where matter came from is really important to the way they will ultimately view God. Will you see God as the originator of all things? Or will you say that he couldn't originate anything? All he can do is fabricate things. You choose. Will you see God as incapable of creating something out of nothing? Or is he fully capable of creating, even speaking all things into existence? Again, that will determine the type of God you worship. And if you choose with your willing mind to worship a God who can't create things out of nothing, I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to tell you I don't believe that. I see differently, but I'll love you. And I think we ought to do that with everybody. You have the right to believe these things, but when you narrow it down, that's kind of the decision you're making about the God you worship. God either submits to the demands of material that has pre-existed him, even amidst laws and principles, and is capable of doing some things, or he's less than supreme. Is he supreme or less than supreme? Is he simply a glorified human being that has always existed materially, limited by the material universe, or does he govern it all because he created it all? Based on the biblical account and its descriptions of him, I personally choose to believe that no matter what the world and the heavens were composed of, if God used pre-existing matter to create the heavens and the earth, or if he spoke everything into existence at the creation's irrelevant to me, I believe that all the material he ever used was created by him out of nothing at the beginning. Now, whether he used pre-existing to form this earth, who knows? But it didn't pre-exist him. That's how I see it, and that's how I read the Bible, and you can be different. But for me, this approach that I choose to take, he receives all glory. He is the one who has the power, and he is the one who is worthy of worship. And so there it is it comes to Creatio ex Nihilo and Creatio ex Materia.